Okay, so we start. Professor Shah will continue his lectures.
Thank you. Is there any question about yesterday lectures? Yeah.
If f is unknown, so then how are we simulating the data at y hat?
Yes, but f is unknown, but it's a computer code. Okay, it's in your computer. You just you put your inputs in the computer. You press enter, and it does the computation.
The function form is unknown.
Sorry.
Function form.
It's a computer code. Okay. You don't know what is inside the computer code. Okay. You just know that it's doing something, but you didn't do the program. You don't know anything about it. Okay. But you have it on your computer. Okay. So let me recall. So yesterday we defined So yesterday we defined what I call the Sobol indices, okay? And I showed you with the peak-freeze method a way to construct a nice estimator that was just so. Okay, and we stopped yesterday with the central limit theorem. So let me. So we assume everywhere that your Y square is finite, so the variance exists. So the first result is that we have a Song law of large number, and the second result is a central limit theorem. So we have convergence to a Gaussian distribution with mean 0 and a variance sigma square, and we will see in the proof how we can compute sigma square. Okay. So the proof of one is really easy, just the application of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the strong law of large number and the continuous mapping theorem. Okay. Okay. So for the second part, what we do, we introduce. So I introduce the vector Wy that will be Yu. Okay, so what do we see in this formula is that we have a we have 4 different variables that are appearing. Okay, so the idea is to first consider this vector. So this is a vector in R4. Okay, so I consider this vector of dimension 4. So here I can apply. We apply the vectorial so we apply the vectorial central limit theorem to the vector Wi that are RID. Okay, so we get so this converges to a Gaussian vector of dimension 4 with mean 0 and covariance matrix sigma. Okay, so now we have to compute. So we are with so this is just the vector of expectation. So here we are. Okay, and now we can compute the sigma. So sigma, what is sigma? This is a 4x4 matrix. It's the matrix of the variances of covariances of each element. So here you have the variance of y, the variance on the diagonal, you have the variances. So what do we see here is that, of course, since here we have the square root, the square of y, if you want to have a central limit theorem, what you will need is to be a moment of order 4. Okay. So here, what I didn't put is if you want to have your central limit theorem, you need to have a central, in the classical assumption of the central limit theorem, you have a moment 2 assumptions. But here, since we are dealing with the square of some variable, you need a moment 4. Okay? Okay, so this guy will be the covariance between y and yu. Okay, and here I have the covariance between y and yu, and here I will have the covariance between y and y square, and so on. Okay. So this is just the covariance matrix of this vector. So now what you do, you introduce a function that goes from R4 to R. That so it takes a vector. Okay, so what do we do? Here we have this one, so xy. So that would be z minus xy divided by t minus x squared. Okay. So I introduce this function that goes from R4 to R, and then you apply the delta method to this central limiter n with that function. Okay. So now apply the delta method. So we apply the delta method with J, which is a differentiable function, so we don't have any problems. And we have G of Okay, so what is sigma square now? Sigma square, so maybe I'm going a little bit fast here. So this converges if you apply to the variable that is the image of this Gaussian I have here, so the N4. So it's the image of the Gaussian with the differential of G at point EW, okay? But this is a linear mapping, okay? Okay, so since the image of a Gaussian vector is a Gaussian, we know directly that this is Gaussian, so this is equal in law so this is equal in law to Gaussian of dimension 1. Okay, and what is sigma square? So to compute sigma square, what it will be the multiplication of this matrix sigma with the gradient of G and the transpose of the gradient of G. Okay, so now we just have to compute the gradient of G. So just do the computation. Okay, so you compute all the partial derivatives. So this one is easy. This one would just be 1 minus t. Okay, so this one is easy. It's just minus x. Okay, so now here what do we have? So something like that, I think. Okay, and the last one would be okay, and then your derivative, you just compute it at the point EW. Okay. So maybe I could. So maybe to make the computation a little bit easier, as usual, we can assume without loss of generality that E of y is equal to 0. Why is that? Because what happens, it's very easy to see that the SUN, the estimator is invariant with respect to any translations of the variable y. So if you shift y by the mean, okay, you will have the same value for SUN. So you can always assume that E of y equals to 0. Okay, so it happens that in here you will have okay. So now when you compute your gradient at this point, what you obtain is okay, so if you compute so x is 0 and y is 0, so here you just have 0. X is 0, so here you have 0. For this one, you have just 1 over the variance of y. And the last one is just so it's this one divided by the variance. So this is t squared, so minus x squared, I think, minus, sorry, so t, so this is just the variance of it okay?
It should be variance of y whole square, I guess.
It's this one, no? Sorry. Okay. So now you take this vector. Okay. So now you just sorry. So this is a vector. Okay. So this is the so now you take this vector. Okay. This is a vector dimension 4. Okay. You take that matrix. Okay. And you multiply here by the transpose of this vector and here by the vector, and you obtain sigma square. Okay. So if I say that this is the, so this is Tg. Okay, so sigma square would just be the transpose you have your theorem. Okay. Okay. So as I said yesterday, now if you want to compare two indices, okay, so for example, if you want to know if S1 is smaller or bigger than S2, what you need is to have the joint distribution of the estimator, okay, to be able to perform, for example, a statistical test, okay. So what you want, in fact, is to consider, so you don't only consider one Sobol index, but you consider, for example, L Sobol indices, okay? So we want to have the joint estimation of SU1, SUL, okay? So you do exactly the same thing, so you can compute in the same way the vector of estimation, okay? So for example, SN U G, it will be just okay, it's the exact same formula. Okay, so here what you did, you simulate your code n times for this one, and n times for this one, and for each of these ones. So you compute your code n times L plus 1, n times L plus 1 times, okay? And now, so you will have, so if this, I call it S, and this Sn, we also have a central limit theorem that tells us that we converge in law to a Gaussian vector of dimension L, which means 0 and covariance of matrix gamma. Okay, so and the proof is the same. I won't do all the computation, but so now you introduce a vector, but it will be a larger dimension. You will have yi u1 yi so you have yi u1 yi u2 and so on. Okay, then you will have yi u1 yi u2 and so on, and you will have y square. Okay, so this is a vector of dimension 2L plus 2, I think. Okay, something like that. And then you consider a function. So you applied the central limit vectorial to this vector, and then you consider the function g that goes from R to L plus 2 to RL, and you apply the delta method to this function, and you have the central limit theorem. Okay. Maybe I can just give you the general formula for gamma. So gamma is just, in that case, So if you do all the computation, you will find at the end that gamma is so gamma will be okay, a matrix of size L times L, and the generical term is equals to, so here you have the covariance between so more places. So minus SU1 SUI SUJ G so it's quite a big formula. So the important thing here is that we know we have an exact formula for the variance. So thanks to this formula, it's possible to build some statistical test. Okay. So maybe we can just give a very simple example. Okay, so one of the applications of this central limit theorem is to it allows us to build some statistical tests. Okay, so imagine so you have a function that, for example, only depends on two variables, and you want to know if x1 is more important than x2. That in a statistical term, that means that if the Sobol less importance, if the Sobol index S1 is less than S2, okay. So what you will do, so maybe I would put it that way. So you want to test something like that. Okay. Okay, so when you build your test, you will build it on when it is the more difficult to separate H0 and H1 is when S1 equal to S2. Okay, it's the condition. It's the point in H0 where the H0 is closest to H1. Okay, so we will build our statistical test when S0 equal to S1. Okay, so first, what we know. Okay, the central limit theorems. Okay, you have this result. You just saw that result 5 minutes ago. Okay, so here the idea is what? It says so. Okay, so it would be that when do we want to reject I0 is when the difference is between, for example, this one minus okay. So the idea would be to say, okay, I will reject I0 is S1 n minus S at 1 n minus S at 2 n is large. Okay. So, but we want to control the error of type 1 of text. So, so what we want to find k that is positive such that the probability under I0 that S1 n S2 at n is larger than k. So I'm under I0. This is the events where I will reject I0. So I want that I want to control this probability. So I want that this control probability, let's say, should be equals to alpha. So we fix the level alpha of our test. Okay. Okay. So now what is happening? It's happening that under H0, what is happening under H0? So the worst case under H0 is S1 minus S2 is equals to 0. Okay. So if we so the first thing it's easy to see that if here you apply the delta method with the function xy, so maybe if g of xy equal x minus y, okay, it's easy to see that we have a central limit theorem for the difference. Okay, so we have that square root of n s at 1 n minus s at 2 n minus S1 plus S2 that will converge in law to a real Gaussian n0 sigma square. And again, sigma square, I know gamma because I have my formula. I know this function, so it's easy to compute sigma square. Okay, so I have an explicit formula for sigma square. Okay, so now what is happening under I0? S1 minus S2 is equals to 0. Okay. So now I know that this term is converged to a Gaussian one variable. Well, I know the variance. So now I can find K and build my test. Okay. So the central limit theorem allows us to build some statistical test and to have some reasonable result to think that S1 is less than S2 or larger than S2, for example. Okay, and you can build a more complicated test. You can want to test something like S1 equals to 0, S2 larger than S3. Using the multiple central limit theorem, you can build any kind of test that you want. Is there any questions? No? so maybe I can give you an exercise that I will do it in practical Tuesday or Wednesday. So, you remember yesterday I introduced the Ishigami function, okay? And I told you that for this function, so we had something that S4 equals to 0. So now we can imagine that we are not able to do the exact computation. So okay. So for doing that, you will need a computer, okay? So we can do that in the practical session Wednesday. Okay. So now, so we know how to estimate the Sobol indices. We have a central limit theorem, but what is the huge drawback of the central limit theorem? Anyone? The drawback of central limit theorem is in the limit, okay? So in practice, you don't have n equals to infinity, okay? The central limit theorem is interesting, but the problem here is that in practice, you never have n equals to infinity. Okay, so, well, nowadays, sometimes with the big data phenomenon, you have a lot of data, but in the computer code experiment area, is the contrary. Your computer code takes 1 day to give you just one simulation. So sometimes if you have 50 simulations, you're happy. Okay, so imagine now I only have n equal 100. Okay, can I say that my estimator is close to the true value? Okay. Okay, so does anyone know something about concentration inequalities? Yes? So maybe okay, so maybe I will start with okay, so imagine you have some Gaussian random variables that are ID and with mean 0 and variance equals to 1. Okay. So we know that the empirical mean converges almost surely to 0. So now I have a fixed n. And I want to know if xn bar is far or not far from 0, okay? So I'm looking if the distance, so I'm fixing an error that is epsilon here, and I'm looking if the distance between xn bar and 0, the limit, is larger than the error epsilon, okay? Okay, and I want to know with what probability this happens, okay? So it's obvious that this probability goes to 0, okay? So, but I'm not interested. I want to know if this goes fast to 0 or not fast, or can I find something that tells me, for example, that this is equal to, I don't know, I would be, so if I have something like that, so this is not true, okay? But that is very bad, because that goes very slowly to 0. But here, if I have something like that, here I'm happy because with n equals to 10, okay? And obviously it should depend also on epsilon, okay? So the first thing maybe that you know, do you know Chebyshev inequality? Yes? So Chebyshev inequality gives you a first answer to this problem. It tells you what tells me a Chebyshev inequality in that case? Sorry?
This is less than equal to variance xn bar divided by epsilon square.
So that will be the variance of xn bar divided by epsilon square. Okay, but what is the variance of xn bar here?
Sigma square by 1 by
Sigma is 1, so that will be just 1 over n divided by epsilon square. Okay? But maybe we can do better than using just the variance to control this probability. So let me just looking at what side what is happening. By symmetry, we can get the other side. So imagine you just want to know if xn bar is larger than epsilon, okay? So what I can do, I can take a t that is a positive, okay? So this is the same thing that the probability that the exponential of t xn bar is larger than exponential of t epsilon, okay? Then you use a Markov inequality. No, maybe first of all for the Gaussian, so that would be, I will do that later. Okay. Since I am a Gaussian, so what do we know is that, what is the distribution of xn bar? So this is a Gaussian, okay, and 0, 1 over n. So since I don't like this, I only like the n0, 1 Gaussian. So I will multiply this one by square root of n, okay? So this is the same thing of square root of n times epsilon, okay? So now, so if I just denote by y, it's n0, 1, 1 variable. So now I'm interested in the probability of y is larger than square root of n times epsilon, okay? So since I have some Gaussian, maybe I can do some computation here. So this is just the integral between square root of n and epsilon of the density. So x minus n minus x square. Okay? So we don't know how to compute this integral, but we can find a nice approximation of this integral. So what is the trick here? You say, okay, I don't know how to integrate that, but I know how to integrate this guy. So I'm multiplying and dividing by x, okay? And what is happening is that on this interval, 1 over x is always larger than 1 over square root of n times epsilon. So this is, okay, the integral between square root of n epsilon okay, and now this I know this is easy to integrate. So at the end, what you get square root of 2 pi square root of n epsilon exponential minus n epsilon divided by 2. Okay. So we see that it's much better than what we obtained by Chebyshev inequality, because here you have the rate of decrease here is just 1 over n, and here we have something that is exponential decreasing. Okay, so it goes really, really fast to 0. Okay. In fact, for the Gaussian, it's better than that because we can have a minoration of that with the same kind of bond. In fact, this guy is equivalent to this probability. Okay? Okay, so this is the first method. More or less, I can do almost an exact computation for the Gaussian, but in general, you cannot do. So what you can do, so the second method, that will be more the general method, is so you take a positive t and you say so again maybe I should use so this is larger than the square root of n epsilon. So this is okay. And now you use a Markov inequality that tells you that square root of n epsilon, maybe I'm missing something here. Square root of n epsilon, like that. And I think here I have epsilon squared, sorry. Okay, so this is just is Markov inequality okay for everyone? Yes? So this is just Markov inequality. So what is equal to, what is what's the value of this one? Do you know how to compute that or no?
E half the square.
Something like that? Should be divided by 2, no? Okay? So now what you do, so here you have a bound that is true for any positive t. So what you do, you will find the best t possible. Okay? So what you want the bound that is the closest to that one. So you want the minimum value of this bound. Okay? So you compute the optimal t. So you just take a look at the function that we have here in the exponential. Okay? So when this function, so this is a a polynomial of degree 2, so it is minimal when the derivative is equal to 0, so you just compute the derivative, it's really easy, and you have g prime of t. Okay, so this is equal to 0, this is equal to t equals square root of n times epsilon, okay? So now you put the t here in your formula, and what you get at the end, so at the end you get that obtain so we have something when x1 is minus n times divided by 2. Okay. So if you compare, so what do we see here if you compare the two methods? Okay. We see that we have the exact same thing in the exponential part. Okay, and here we are just missing the polynomial part. Okay, but with Markov inequality, we obtain the good rate of decrease in the exponential scale. Okay, we are just losing this factor here, square root of n, but this guy is negligible with respect to that one. Okay, so we don't lose a lot. Okay, so what is happening now is that if you don't have Gaussian random variables, it would be impossible to do this exact computation. Okay, but we have some hope to make this method work. Okay, so there are some general inequalities. So I will present the one that we will use for our Sobol index. Okay, that is called Bennett inequality. So you take x1, xn independent random variables. You don't need them to be IID, okay? You just need them to be independent. Okay. You assume that the variance of xi exist. So all the variants exist. Okay. You assume that there exists a positive real number b such that your variables are bounded by b, okay? So, so that means that you have some bounding random variables, okay? For my application, that won't be a problem because the Sobol index are between 0 and 1. So I know in advance that my random variable would be bounded, okay? Okay, and I define S to be the sum equals 1 to 1 of xi so this is the center sum of your random variables, okay? And I denote by V. It will be more or less a variance term. So it will be the sum of the moments of order 2 of Mariano variance. Okay, so this is has to be understood more or less as the variance, but I didn't center it. Okay. Okay, I introduce two functions. So the first one that I call phi of u, that is exponential of u minus 1 minus u, and for u larger than minus 1, h of u would be one plus u log of 1 plus u minus u. Okay? Then what we have, so we have the following. For all positive t, we have that the logarithm of the Laplace transform of S, so this is by definition the log of the logarithm of exponential ts. Okay, so this function is important because it's exactly the function that appears in the when you use Markov inequality. Okay, if you put it on the exponential, you have exponential log here. Okay, so this is a key function to obtain concentration equality. Okay, in order to obtain concentration equality, what you need is to be able to have some nice bound on this function. Okay, so that is exactly the first point here. So this guy. Okay, so the first thing that tells you this result is that you have a bound on psi. Applying the method here, you obtain a concentration inequality that tells you that for any x positive, is okay. Maybe one remark, because maybe here it's not clear. This formula is not very easy to understand what it means. So the nice thing is that we have that it's easy to remark. It's easy to see that this function h that is here. Okay, we can control it by something that is maybe nicer. That would be u squared divided by 2 plus 1 plus u divided by 3. Okay, so this is just an easy computation to do. Okay, and in that case, what would you obtain? So you can replace h by this one. In the you obtain this formula, okay? And if you compare okay, if you compare the formula, here you see that you have x squared divided by 2. That is exactly the analog of epsilon squared divided by 2 here. Okay. Here, I don't have the n. Why? Because I'm looking for to s, and not here. I was looking to x n bar. Okay. So that's why I don't have n here. So that is completely normal. Okay. here I have a V that what I told you is the analog of the variance. Okay. Here I took some N01, so the variance is, in some sense is 1. Okay, so that's why it does not appear. But what you see here is that we are losing something because we have the x plus b times x divided by 3, okay? So that is just because in the Gaussian world, I was able to have an exact computation of the Laplace transform. And here I only have a majoration, okay? So I'm losing something because I'm using a majoration, okay? Okay, so maybe I can do the proof of this result for you. Okay, so the first thing, if you replace xi by xi divided by b, you can assume without loss of generality that b is equals to 1. Okay. The second thing is to notice that the application that maps u to phi u, so I remember phi u is this function, okay, divided by u squared. This is an increasing function, okay? So this is just an easy computation. Okay, so using that, so okay, it's easy to see that if you take a x that is less to 1, we have the phi of psi x divided by t2 x2 is less than phi 2 divided by t2. Okay. Where I do x smaller than 1, since b equals to 1, all my random variables will be less or equal to 1. Okay. So using that, you have that phi t of xi is less or equal of, so you put this guy here, so the t square simplify, so xy square phi t. Okay, so this is just xy square e of t minus 1 minus t. Okay. So now I can, so step 3 is to compute Cs of t, okay? So this is a sum, okay? So since the variables are independent, you have the product with the exponential, you can, the product goes there by independence, and with the logarithm, you obtain a sum again, okay? So what you have at the end, you just have the sum of the logarithm of exponential of t xi minus e of xi. Okay, so this is, so I can rewrite that. So you can split this one is determined, so you can split this one in two. So here you will have Txi V minus okay. Okay, so now what you do, so okay, so now I forgot to do something. So this is just, sorry, it will be clearer like this. Okay, so this guy is just that. So what you get is at the end the exponential of Txi here is less or equal of 1 plus Txi plus xi squared e of t minus 1 minus t. Okay? So now you use this inequality here. Okay? And you compute everything, and what you get at the end. Okay, so maybe I can skip some details. But at the end, what you will have is, so you just do that, and at the end, what you obtain is just this inequality, okay? So just replacing this guy by this inequality, and then it's just easy algebra computation, okay? And to go from this to this, we just use the fact that the log of 1 plus x is less or equal to x, and you have this equality. Okay. Is there any question? The end of this lecture is at 11 or?
11.
Okay. Okay, so now I will explain how we can how we can apply this inequality to obtain concentration inequalities for the subword indices. Okay. Okay, so we have, so let's say S1n, for example, that is okay, and we want to okay, and we want to know to have a concentration inequality for S at 1n, okay? So what we see there is this one S1n is not a sum. So what will we do? We will pass all the denominator in this side, okay? So you will have so this will be larger of okay, so something like that. SU plus y, S1 plus y. Okay, and then you make everything goes the other way. Okay, so c'était maybe okay, so now you can put all these things this way, and I will skip the details, but more or less, you put everything in one way, and you have several sums of random variables, okay, that you decompose your events in some events, okay. For example, if you want to say that the event A plus B is larger than C, for example, okay, you will use things like that. This is included in the event A larger than C over 2 union by B okay. So this is easy to see with so A plus B larger than C, so it's something that is this part of the plane, okay. A larger than C over 2 is this part. B larger than C over 2 is this part. So you see that you have the inclusion, okay. So for example, here we'll have some sum that are larger than something. So we'll see that the probability that the sum is larger is now equal to the probability that this one is larger than C divided by 2 plus this one larger than B divided by 2, okay? So at the end, you will split your global events, and you will apply and 5 times the Bennett inequality, okay? And at the end, you will obtain a concentration equality for the Sobol indices, okay? I don't want to do the details because it's a little bit technical, okay? So if you are interested, I have a paper where the proof is written, okay? And you can have all the details. Okay, so what we saw is that we have a method to estimate the Sobol indices, okay, and that needs no assumption. We don't know anything on the function f, okay, but maybe sometimes you have some information about f, and you could use them to have another estimation of the Sobol indices, okay? So I didn't plan to do that, but after your talk of yesterday, since you introduced all the materials to work in functional spaces, I can present one example where we can estimate the Sobol indices using information we have on the model, okay? So I will be in the framework of yesterday talk, okay, where we had an Hilbert space. Okay, so with the product scalar. Okay, and so my Hilbert is separable. So I take a P independent centered H valued stochastic processes. With a finite fourth moment, okay? And I assume that y. So I have so this will be just the functional linear model that was presented yesterday, I think. So that we assume that y is some mu. Okay, so y is mu, so mu is just a real number here. The beta k are elements of my Hilbert space. They are my framework that are unknown here. Okay, and epsilon is an error. Epsilon is the error. We have that epsilon is centered. The variance of epsilon I will denote it by eta square, and epsilon is independent of the random element xi. Okay. Okay, so we want to estimate the first order Sobol indices that are S1, S2, SP, sorry. So the first method, so the first method will be to use the pick and freeze method. So now we know how to do that. So okay, so that's it. It's easy. Okay. So what I will do, I will present a second method. Okay. So the second method will be based on the Karinahan-Love decomposition you saw yesterday of your processes. Okay. Okay, so Okay, so if I just want to estimate S1, I can consider that all the other variables are some noise, and I can put them in the noise. Okay, so I just can do as this. I just have one stochastic process that is X1. Okay, and I consider this model. Okay, so what we have to do our estimation here. So the observation we have. So we have a sample of size n. Of the input xi and the output yi. Okay. Okay, so if you compute, so if we want to compute for the Sobol indices, what will be the expectation of y knowing x? Okay, so that will be 0 at the end. So you just recover. Mu plus the scalar product of B1 and X1. Okay, so if you compute the variance, okay, you just have the variance of the scalar product between B1 and X1. Okay. So S is just this guy, okay? So again, the denominator will be easy to estimate. So I just will present a method to estimate the numerator. Okay. So now I want to estimate okay, so now I assume that I have a moment of order 4. So in particular, the moment of order 2 is finite. Okay, so since we have that x as a moment of order 2, I think we saw yesterday that means that the covariance operator is Hilbert-Schmidt, okay? So I recall the covariance operator is just it takes a function in H and it gives you something that I call gamma of f. That is the definition. You do the product scalar of x1 with f. Okay, so it was presented yesterday in the afternoon. So we know that this covariance operator is Hilbert-Schmidt. Okay, that means that you have a base, an orthogonal base, with so you have a okay. So we saw that this sequence of lambda L was decreasing. Okay. Yes, you remember that, and also we had the property that the sequence Okay? Okay, so this is your orthonormal basis. So you can decompose now your x1 in this basis. So this is the Karinaulov decomposition of x. So you know that x1, you can write x1 as a sum, an infinite sum from L equals to 1 to infinity of the square root of lambda L. Okay, so I recall that phi L are elements of your functional space H, and here CL are random variables. Random variables that are that are centered. With variance equals to 1. And we have the covariance between CI and CL prime equals to 0. Okay. So as it was said yesterday, we have a separation between the stochastic part that is in a psi L and the functional part that is in a phi L. Okay. And obviously, we have that the scalar product between x1 and phi L would just be okay. Maybe I will stop now. Well, I will stop now and we continue after the break. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions?
If there are no questions, let's thank Professor Namaste. Break for tea, which is outside.